In weird, macabre, ironic news, a man in Vancouver, Canada, who opened up the first store to openly sell tested heroin, cocaine, meth, and MDMA has sadly now died from a suspected fentanyl overdose. Jerry Martin, 51 years old, opened the drugstore in Vancouver's downtown east side, became a mobile store, and was considered ground zero for Canada's overdose epidemic. That part of town was. More info on the drug laws in British Columbia. The province recently began a 3-year drug criminalization pilot project for possession of small amounts of opioids, cocaine, meth, and MDMA, but selling remains prohibited. Martin told Vice News he opened the store because he wants to give people drugs that have been tested and are free from adulterants, including fentanyl. Although fentanyl, which is driving record overdoses in Canada and the US, is the primary street opioid that Vancouverites now use, Martin is instead selling heroin. Martin said he'd be selling people a max of 2.5 grams of each drug, with serving sizes as small as a point or 1/10 of a gram. Under BC's decriminalization policy, a person can have up to 2.5 grams of the aforementioned substances in total without facing criminal consequences. He charged street prices, smart move, with grams of cocaine and meth going for $90 and $50 respectively. Clearly he didn't know my guy. I'm kidding, I don't have a guy. I don't do these things. He was arrested within 24 hours of opening the store, but prepared arguments to launch a constitutional challenge in the event this happened. Martin later told Vice News his drugs and mobile shop had been seized. He had struggled with funding and finding a space to open before eventually purchasing the mobile store. Police also banned him from returning to the downtown east side, but about a month after his arrest, he told Vice News he was still planning to reopen in a pop-up store model one day. Martin said he was moved to open the store when his stepbrother, Gord Rennie, sadly died of an overdose last year. Martin himself originally survived his overdose, but he remained unresponsive in the hospital, and his family eventually decided to take him off of life support. As his partner, Krista Thomas, said, he wanted to save lives.
So my take on this, guys, is look, in the beginning, it sounds like a funny title, right? Guy says he's gonna sell safe, hard drugs and then dies from hard drugs. But of course, when you look into the story, it's tragic. And so I'm gonna get to the serious side of this in a second, but this does happen from time to time, right? I think so, a million years ago, and I don't remember if this is exactly right, 30 years ago or something. I remember reading a story in the papers about a guy who said he was like the preeminent expert, from what I remember, about how you can improve your heart through jogging. And as you can tell where this is going, he died of a heart attack while jogging. Right, so it happens from time to time. That doesn't mean you shouldn't jog. And so his core mission of, hey, fentanyl is really dangerous, and I want people to be able to, if they're taking hard drugs, to take them without the fentanyl mixed in, because then that'll ruin their lives. Well, that's definitely true, and unfortunately, we don't know how he started on the fentanyl, but it happened to him as well. And so here, I'll be your Nancy Reagan, okay? So the problem with the way that politicians in this country dealt with drugs was that they put them all in the same batch, except they like alcohol, that's a fine drug. Coffee, that's a fine drug. But marijuana and heroin are the same. They're all illegal and awful, and your brain will fry if you go on them. Well, no, that's not true. Marijuana is in a lot of ways safer than alcohol and is in a completely different category. And some of the other drugs are, have nuances. So I wouldn't tell you to go do shrooms or LSD without being really safe and going and double checking and doing it in a good, safe environment, etc. On the other hand, guys, don't do it, man. All the hard drugs. So that's why what I mean by I'll be your Nancy Reagan. Just say no. Like the heroin, Look, I don't know enough about all these drugs, and I'm not an expert on this, and so I don't know how terrible cocaine is. But I know once you're down the heroin path, it's super hard to come back. Heroin, fentanyl, meth, these are disasters. Under no circumstances when someone offers you like, hey, this will be a fun time. Really, will it? Well, so when I lose all my teeth, is that when the fun starts? Or when I die, is that when the fun starts? When I'm comatose in the streets and can't think and my brain is fried, is that when the fun starts? So for whatever it's worth, stay away from those hard drugs. They're I've never heard anyone go, oh, I did a lot of hard drugs and it turned out great for me. Not once, ever in history. Jackson.
Yeah, and this is actually, when it comes to politics, I think this is the area where I have kind of the most passion and pay the most attention to. A lot of it's my background and, just the fact that our drug laws that really set the tone for much of the world's drug laws simply don't work. And one of the biggest issues is all of drugs, as you put it, not only are all of drugs, especially the illegal substances, all lumped into one group, but drugs in general, if they're legal, those must be good. Those must be okay. But if they're illegal, those must be bad. When in reality, illegal and legal drugs, in a lot of ways, are the same thing. Cocaine does the exact same stuff as Ritalin and Adderall. Obviously, it's not the same. It's not as safe, but it is speed. But because cocaine, meth, any of those things are unregulated, they're incredibly easy to get. Part of what I did before I got into politics, I sold drugs for 7 years. Never had a problem getting my hands on them. I don't mind saying that. That's part of my political plight. You know what I'm saying? Never had a problem getting my hands on anything like that. It's very easy for kids to get their hands on that because they're unregulated. But when you have something like this, Ritalin, that's what that is. I can only get my hands on X amount, that's my prescription every single month because it's controlled and regulated by the government. So I think that this whole subject is really interesting because at the end of the day, I also have enough alcohol on my fridge to kill myself right now. I'm not gonna do it. So, a lot of people will look at this and be like, now you see, we can't legalize drugs, we can't decriminalize them because it doesn't work. But at the end of the day, people smoke themselves and drink themselves to death, but most people don't. So education really is what makes the biggest difference in terms of people understanding what these substances do, how to go about using them safer if you're going to use them. And then, of course, to really tackle the problem is the war on drugs really just makes drug use worse and easier. And that's why we see fentanyl all and everything. So it's just a really interesting field to me.
Jackson, I just want to ask you one thing. So is there a drug where you draw the line? Because I'm not sure. Like I think that there's an interesting argument to be made that you make everything legal, but do not like promote it and hype it up, etc. Make it like a super clinical setting where people have to take it, and it's kind of a bummer to go to a government building. And I don't know that that's exactly the Portugal model, but I know in Portugal they did some things that were interesting and got good results. So I'm torn on where to draw the line. So do you have a sense of which drug you would draw it on, if any, on legalization?
I think that in terms of how dangerous it is, how much you can get hooked on it, just it being a controlled substance allows for people to get their hands on it or not. So me, and again, I don't mind saying this, everybody who follows me knows it. I used to do cocaine a lot, and that wasn't really that physically addictive. I've never recommended people do it. You're 100% right, you shouldn't do hard drugs. But if people understood how something like that worked better, if it was legalized, you could put it into pill form because like I said, that's all Adderall and Ritalin really is. It's just another version of cocaine. And people don't look at it like that, which is a problem. They don't look at like when they're taking Xanax and stuff, that's really what heroin is. That's really what fentanyl is, a different version of it, a much less safe version of it. But ultimately, I choose to take Ritalin. It helps me focus. It helps me deal with anxiety over cocaine because cocaine is very destructive. But I think, again, if you just control the substances, less people will do them overall because they'll have more of a choice on how to address their needs. And, people run to drugs to escape reality. If it's harder for them to get their hands on it, they won't be able to get their hands on it as easily. In my opinion, opioids, heroin and stuff, that's when because you start to touch that. Opioids take people's souls. But people do Adderall and Ritalin legally every day. And they don't realize that Coke is kind of So I think that there's a lot of room for discussion in this area because people do drugs. People take, what is it? All the legal opioids. So yeah. I think it doesn't really make that much of a difference. You just have to control the substance, and that makes it harder to get.
Yeah, and just to be clear, like OxyContin was heroin. That's why everybody got addicted.
Exactly.
Yeah, and that's why.
And seeing it like that makes you think, what are we really doing here? You know what I'm saying? Like, what are we actually doing? We're making two different versions of the same thing, legal and illegal. And I just think that there's a lot of room for discussion there.
I'd say the line you would draw would be at fentanyl because it just seems that the tiniest amount kills people. And I know people that have had near-death experiences from that and have had their friends die from stuff laced with even just the tiniest amount of it. I suppose there's an argument that if it was government regulated, they would put such minute amounts in something that they would be able to control, that people wouldn't typically randomly die from it. But I don't really see, generally speaking, the benefit of that. Yeah. I see a pretty big distinction with that kind of thing, opioids from hallucinogenic drugs, which not only often don't harm people, but they can expand their minds. And I've experience with that. And I have found it to be a positive, and it would be certainly better if it were in some ways regulated, because you wouldn't have to worry about where it was gotten and whether it's clean, testing it yourself, and all of these things that you have to worry about now. But it really is that conundrum, because when governments do not regulate these substances, it just causes deaths. In 2016 in British Columbia, 11,000 British Columbians died. And they since legalized having a small amount, but there's no place to get it where you know it's clean. And even the guy who was selling tested versions himself just died of the exact thing. You have to assume that it was laced, and maybe he didn't test one time, or maybe he straight up tried fentanyl. I don't know the answer to that, but the government does not put their hands into trying to figure that out, and then it causes disastrous consequences.
Yeah, super last thing I'll say is, guys, it depends on your genes as well. There's a number of factors, but your genes are a huge factor. So if you have genes that are more likely to fall victim to addiction, then you gotta be super careful. And here's the problem, nobody knows. You don't know what's in your genes. So you don't know if you're gonna get addicted or not. By the way, the same is true of alcohol. Like if you've got an addictive personality because it's randomly your DNA, well, alcohol is gonna ruin your life. And so just like, we're not in the camp of either extreme, like, oh, all drugs, boo, oh, never have fun, oh, no way, it's gonna ruin your brain. And oh yeah, all drugs are awesome, just check it out, see how it turns out. No, don't do fentanyl. There's no good that comes out of that. That's super obvious. Or meth.
And it does matter exactly as you said, Cenk. It does matter what's in your genes, and if you're carrying and you get in trouble, the fifth pocket is always the key. That little pocket.
There you go.
There
you go. Leave them with a gem.
Thanks for watching the Young Turks. Really appreciate it. Another way to show support is through YouTube memberships. You'll get to interact with us more. There's live chat emojis, badges. You've got emojis of me, Anna, John, JR. So those are super fun. But you also get playback of our exclusive member-only shows and specials right after they air. So all of that, all you gotta do is click that join button right underneath the video. Thank you.